the essential difficulty in the process of defining orthodoxy is the wide range of disagreement that is acceptable within orthodoxy. The whole concept of Elu ve'elu, both of these are the words of the living God, and so forth and so forth. But the fact is what makes orthodoxy so difficult to define is that the system itself fosters disagreement. Okay? And this is something that Moshe Feinstein points out in one of his response lectures. He basically argues that the very nature of orthodoxy is to promote distinction in thought and disagreement, because it sort of opens up new vistas of understanding and so forth. So this makes orthodoxy very difficult to define. It also opens up issues of, the issue of how do you define it, especially when you get to the actual border. Okay, in other words, everyone knows it's outside of orthodoxy. You say, if a person says it's okay to eat pork, you sort of know, okay, that's outside of orthodoxy. But when you start getting into closer to the border, it's very, very hard to really define where that line is. And I wanted to point that out, that's one of the inherent aspects of orthodoxy. Now, it's one of the issues that happens to exist in this whole process of the parameters, because the present tension that exists in many ways in terms of the parameters of orthodoxy is a tension between what you would call the Haredi world and the more quote-unquote modern world. And one of the issues that exists in that is the Haredi world also wishes to maintain strong authority in the Godel, okay, in specifically the leader of the generation, or the leaders of the generation. In a certain way, a lot of what works within the Haredi world is a narrowing of parameters inherently, by the fact that the Godel says, and it's this opinion is the right opinion, other opinions are not. So the truth is that one of the tensions that exist in our world today, in terms of defining orthodoxy, is that inherent within orthodoxy itself is a tension between a more authoritative world within orthodoxy, which wishes to have a much more monolithic definition of orthodoxy, centered around the decisions of the global authority, which has legitimacy because it's based upon scholarship, and these people, these Gedolim, have defined themselves as top-notch scholars, and a world of within the non-Orthodox world, which constantly refers to the concept of that spectrum of opinion. Much of this leads into another tension, which is a tension of authority versus autonomy, and that's something that I dealt with on our website in my first discussion on the Sifkin affair, which was really very much an affair involving defining authority, or defining orthodoxy, in the sense that what you had was a tension between authority and autonomy. In many ways, Elu ve'elu, the idea of the wide spectrum of opinion and the development of this, and the almost like the a sort of like a positive view to disagreement. The fact that you see such spectrum of opinions is an outgrowth of creativity, and the fact that you want the creative mind. In many ways, that also fosters autonomy. I want to hear what you have to say. Okay? Authority, which basically says, I want to hear what the authoritative figure wants to say, does not really open itself up to broad creativity, but on the other hand, authority is based upon knowledge. So one of the tensions that exists is between a knowledge base or authoritative figure, which basically says these individuals have the knowledge and therefore they become the authority figure, and therefore that puts a limitation on the autonomy out there in the general populace, which also ties to creativity. Now, the truth is you can coexist with that as long as it doesn't have any practical what do you call it, applications, in terms of in study of some Talmudic tractate where it has no practical application. You're studying something to do with some sacrifices in the temple and so forth, and you have tremendous amount. So there, in the base medrash, you can have creativity because there's no practical applications. But the point is when it comes to practical, you have this aspect of authority. Now, this authority figure has a value because it's based upon knowledge. Because one of the weaknesses of autonomy at its extreme is the fact that autonomy can basically allow anyone autonomy. See, this really goes back to another issue. What happens with defining orthodoxy in our present world, there's always a tension of trying to find where the line of drawing orthodoxy is. And one of the tensions is because orthodoxy has a value in autonomy, a value in creativity, and a value in breadth of opinions. At the same point in time, orthodoxy values authority and the fact that it values specific opinions because it draws a line. It says this opinion is within the pale, this opinion is not within the pale. You see this. You see this back in the Talmudic times. Yes, everyone points to BAYT Hillel and BAYT Shammai and the different opinions, but at the same point in time, the Perushim, which are the forerunners of the Rabbinites and the forerunners of Orthodox Judaism, did not have that same type of welcoming or acceptance towards the Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, which are the forerunners of the Karaites. There was a line drawn in the sand there. The Tzaddukim were outside the pale. So there was tremendous acceptance of BAYT Hillel and BAYT Shammai, and they had very acceptance of different opinions and different outlooks and so on and so forth. There was a parameter drawn. The extension of that is in our world today. The extension is somewhat that the breadth of allowing difference of opinions and actually thinking that there's a value in difference of opinions comes from a world of creativity, which is very much tied to autonomy. You have a voice. You can say something. Okay, you'll look at Judaism a little bit differently, and therefore there's tremendous value in autonomy because it ties to the inherent creativity of every individual and the fact that the Torah expresses that creativity. Okay, we talk about that there's 70 faces to Torah, but we also talked about that you know, the 600,000 Jews who were at Kabbalat Torah all represent a different vision of Torah. It's very, very much a very strong personal creativity because and that goes in line with a divine aspect of Torah, in terms of allowing for this broad creativity. At the same point in time, authority says, no, there's limitations. You have to also have knowledge. You have to also have some kind of basis which puts a kind of creativity. Not every opinion is legitimate. This became an issue in the development of Reform Judaism, and that's why Orthodoxy has become even more difficult to define in our present age. Because we're living in the shadow of the Haskalah and the Jewish Reformation. What happened at the time at the beginning of the Reform movement was an issue of the value of autonomy. One of the great issues in the 1700s was an issue of how does a human being know what's moral. Okay? Do you want religion? Is your morality based on religion or morality based upon inner sense of morality, greater or not? Okay, it got into the issue of revelation versus reason. If you believe in revelation as the essence of morality, then what makes something moral is because God says it's moral. So it's the authority figure outside the individual who tells you what is moral. Reason says that your understanding of morality comes from within yourself. Okay, now, in the 1700s, there was a greater understanding of that inner sense of morality being still similar in all human beings. It wasn't the same type of relativism that exists today. It wasn't the same type of a variety of opinions, but it basically said it comes from the individual. And there was a major philosophical issue at the time: is it better to have your morality from religion, the authority, because God tells you, or because of you feeling it? So let me ask you, give you an example.
Where does the concept of you're feeling it, you're feeling moral?
No, you have an understanding of moral. It could come from a rational idea. Immanuel Kant's idea was with the categorical imperative, is that reason leads to this conclusion that this is moral, but it comes out of your own perception.
Well, what's the relationship between moral and good and evil?
Moral is good, and evil is doing something immoral.
Depends your perspective.
In what way? That's true from a modern perspective.
An Islamist would feel he's being very moral.
That's very true. That's very true. But the Islamist believes his morality comes from an outside authority telling you. See, let me explain where it starts from. Don't murder. Person says, I'm not a murderer. Who do you define as a more moral person? The person who says, I find it disgusting to murder. I'd be abhorred by someone who murders. I think the act is horrendous. Or the person who says, I don't have any feelings about murder, but God told me not to murder, so I don't murder. People shouldn't murder because God told you not to murder. But I don't have any personal feelings about it. I don't have any opinion on my own. Who would you consider to be the moral? Okay, so that's an issue. Mm-hmm. That was a major issue in the 18th century. Where do you believe that morality comes from God tells you? In other words, God said don't murder, and that's why it's bad. You need God to tell you in the Ten Commandments don't murder because otherwise you wouldn't know it. Or is there an idea of I think it's wrong to murder? Now, in the 1700s, it was the age of reason, and philosophy was getting into a whole issue of the world of reason and the sense of morality coming from the individual being a higher form of morality. Okay? That's really what Moshe Mendelssohn did in writing his major book, Jerusalem. He basically argued in Jerusalem that there is a natural morality in the world from reason. Halacha is a revealed law. That was Moshe Mendelssohn's great innovation, where he said that in Judaism we believe in a natural morality, in morality of reason. When we talk about Sinai, we're talking about revealed law for the Jewish nation. Okay, which put it into a different category. It's not revealed morality; it's revealed law. Okay. That issue, though, between reason and revelation, that was a major issue, and it became an issue in terms of Reform Judaism, because Reform Judaism then developed the idea that autonomy was a value, because if you believe in morality, you also believe in autonomy. And you started arguing that autonomy was a value, which was part of what was developing, that autonomy, which is your thought process, is a value. What occurs is that in Reform Judaism, the challenge was, should you do mitzvot because of authority or because of autonomy? Now, I don't know if this was the idea in the 1800s or in the 1700s, 1800s with Reform Judaism, but I remember hearing one Reform rabbi, basically, I heard him speak once in the 1980s, and he basically developed an argument that the Jews were mistaken in saying Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear or we will understand. That what they should have said is nishma v'naseh. There's a greater value in doing something once you understand its value than in doing it just because of an authority. Mm-hmm. So his argument was that, as a Reform Judaism. And by the way, this is a form of Reform Judaism. Okay, there are many Reform Jews today. There are Reform Jews today that are almost totally observant of halacha, and will totally tell you that they are Reform Jews.
Yeah, no,
Okay?
I know.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
You know people like that, right? Okay. Now, why are they observant? What makes them Reform? Okay? In other words, they'll sit there and say, "Hey, I'm a Reform. I am theologically Reform." Okay? But put on tefillin. I keep a kosher home. I keep Shabbos. The wife goes to mikveh. Okay? Okay? Now, what makes them Reform theologically? They're doing all the commandments. See new individuals like that? Okay, now, so what makes them Reform? So what this rabbi was arguing was the difference is Reform Judaism values autonomy. There was a weakness in doing Judaism or religion because of authority. Okay, simply because even God told you to do it. Okay, no.
Okay, and that's why of the people that I know who did that, because I always understood the definition, now whether it was the exact or right or wrong or just a piece of it, of Reform Judaism, was that they didn't take the Torah, the Bible, literally. But so that would fit in. They may not take it, and maybe it's not meant to be literal, but they didn't take it as authoritative, but they believe that these are the halakha we should follow based on
that's a little bit different.
How they feel.
Yeah, what they're saying is that doing something because you're told to do it is not the highest form of doing it. Doing it because you understand why it has value, and then doing it is a higher form.
That's what I was trying.
Right, and that's essentially what Reform Judaism was about.
And that's how I always understood.
Right, and that really stating the value of autonomy. Okay, what they're saying is better for me to keep kosher once I know I have a personal reason to keep kosher, okay, rather than just doing it because God tells me to do it. Now that runs in the face of Nasa v'nishma, which is a concept that says I'm doing it because God told me to do it, which runs in the face of mitzvot from an Orthodox perspective. Now, at the same point in time, Orthodoxy, through its analysis of disagreement and creativity and stuff like that and variant opinions, has a certain value in autonomy. Reform Judaism pushed that value of autonomy beyond the pale of Orthodoxy. And one of the reactions to that was a lessening of the value of autonomy within Orthodoxy. So what you start seeing in response to a lot of issues, people look at it like in response to Reform Judaism in the 1800s, Orthodoxy entrenched. Orthodoxy became stricter. You had the famous statement of the Chasam Sofer, which may not have really been a statement, that Chazer Sashim in the Torah, new ideas are forbidden and stuff like that. When you look at it and say they cannot really have meant it, but they were reacting to Reform Judaism to extending out. And the essence of that extending out, well, it's true, Reform Judaism changed the law. The truth is, Reform Judaism did not buy the scriptural integrity of the divine integrity of the scriptures, so it allowed them to have greater amount of flexibility and so forth and so forth. But the underlying motivation was, we think there's a value in you thinking. Now, Orthodoxy always said there's a value in thinking, but it had a parameter from the authority concept. That's really what Nasa v'nishma is about. Nasa v'nishma, it wasn't just Nasa, we will do, which would be
you define Nasa v'nishma.
Yeah, Nasa v'nishma is a statement where it said Nasa is we will do, and Nishma on the surface means we will listen, but really must mean was we will understand. And the key of that idea is when God said, here's a Torah, and He says we will do it, the point is, if it was just a matter of authority, they could have said we will do it. If you like actually the Chumash, you'll see that in Sefer Shemot there are actually 3 times where we talk about how the Jews responded to the charge of Sinai. 2 times they just said Nasa. Once they said Nasa v'nishma. Nasa is a statement of base of authority. You know, jump, how high, right? That's a Nasa type statement, right? I'm going to act. Nasa v'nishma, which a lot of people don't recognize this. Nasa v'nishma is a certain development beyond authority. If you just wanted to say authority, it will be the general, and the private says, that's it, I'll listen. the fact that the Jew said Nasa B'Nishma tells you that it's not just we will do, but we will understand. But the point is there is some idea of trying to understand what we're trying to do as well. But it came after the agreement of authority, so authority had some overriding over autonomy, autonomy being the development of your own thoughts, or the aspect of autonomy being that you can think too. But what Reform Judaism basically said, no, Nasa Nishma was wrong. Nishma must always proceed before Nasa, and then in that process they basically said, hey, and by the way, we're not going to do it anyways because we disagree, and then they took away the aspect that it was divine anyways. But it all comes out of that autonomy value. So the reaction to Reform Judaism was a lessening of the value of autonomy within Orthodoxy. That was one of the reactions. That was the entrenchment reaction, and a very powerful reaction. Okay, that basically said we gotta bring out the authority, and you see this existing in Orthodoxy today, where the authority side of the coin has a little bit more power. One of the outgrowths of that is trying to find the parameters of Orthodoxy, where on one side, not only are you trying to figure out where to find a balance, but you have this weight on one side which lessens the aspect of autonomy. Okay? So that creates an issue. And that tension within Orthodoxy is one of the tensions between the Haredi world and the more non-Orthodox world, where the Haredi world is very much the continuation of the authority aspect, especially the more entrenchment authority aspect from the world of Chasam Sofer and so forth. Okay, while the more non-Orthodox world is saying, let's go back, let's do autonomy. But with this development of autonomy, you have this issue. Okay, but where do you define autonomy? And that's where you start getting into issues that what is the acceptable autonomy within Orthodoxy? Okay, so that's part of what we're trying to do here, in the sense that because Orthodoxy did have Elu Ve'elu, and did have a certain value of autonomy and a certain value of this creativity, disagreement ideas. So now, how do you define it? And with a certain aspect that this value side has been somewhat is somewhat scrutinized because it is close to Reform Judaism. It's a very interesting thing, in the sense that one of the challenges in Orthodoxy is the fact that you have Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, right? So now you're trying to say, okay, where's Orthodoxy? But on the more right-wing side of Orthodoxy, you don't really have anything on the right-wing side. So therefore, there's nothing you're concerned about. The person can go overboard on the right-wing side. When you start getting into the side that's closer to Conservative Judaism, you're trying to get into, well, where do they find the line between Conservative and Orthodox? And since I'm concerned that, and part of the issue is, well, Conservative Judaism will have similar types of expression of values as this side of Orthodoxy. So it becomes that how do I know what's proper autonomy? Okay, and it becomes a much more subtle issue because you're concerned that maybe there's improper autonomy. Okay, maybe you're concerned that, it's the, using the example of the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer says Chadash Asher Min HaTorah, which basically what he's saying is, it's based upon Chadash is new crops. New crops, you have to bring the Omer before you can eat the new crops, Chadash. So if you had wheat, specifically wheat, if wheat was grown in the year before, before the second day of Pesach, you couldn't eat it until you brought the Omer, and then you could eat the wheat. That's what the Omer was. An Omer sacrifice was a sacrifice brought on the second day of Pesach, right? When we start counting the Omer, and really what it was a sacrifice, and that permitted all the new wheat. That's where you get the Chodesh Asim in the Torah, that new wheat is prohibited until you brought the Omer. So the story was taken that any new idea was also not looked upon positively. So you get a lot of issues where it comes up all the time. Like here's a new idea. You want to do a new innovation in Judaism.
But could the two ideas not be merged? If you've got the authoritative opinion, and it's based on experience, so chances are it's pretty darn good opinion.
Right.
But, so you take that opinion into consideration, and then you put in a dash, it's sort of like putting a dash of this, put in a dash of your creativity, but
that's exactly...
But that is weighted with the knowledge of the authority.
So if Orthodoxy were worked in a vacuum, okay, let's take the issue of bat mitzvah, okay? If Orthodoxy was working in a vacuum, not with Reform or Conservative on the side, don't forget the bat mitzvah was founded by Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, okay, which is clearly what?
I never knew that.
Yeah, bat mitzvah was an innovation from Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, which is a clear heresy from an Orthodox perspective. Okay, the idea of what Mordechai Kaplan believed, there was no personal God, there was no miracles, clearly heretical from it. So the bat mitzvah was his own innovation. So if, let's say, we lived in a totally vacuum of an island, right, and something came up, and you'd have this issue where, we have this idea of, for some reason, the idea of bat mitzvah came up, okay, and it was never done before. So you'd have this issue of tradition versus something innovative, and you'd go back to the authority figure to bring up the knowledge. Is there any reason you can't do a bat mitzvah, and so forth?
Which is usually the argument used. There's no halakha that says you can't.
Right, but the fact is, but the tradition, and it's not so simple. I mean, the fact is that that's what part of it, but it's really not so simple. But the fact is that there's certain arguments and so forth. One of the issues that exists with bat mitzvah is the fact that it originated with Mordechai Kaplan. It originated outside of an acceptable system. Now let me explain what the problem is. The problem is, you see, there's something most people don't recognize. The modern bar mitzvah, is that positive or not?
It's not very positive.
Okay, so the fact is that I just saw someone write this, and I saw it myself. Moshe Feinstein was very much against the bat mitzvah. Okay, he had reasons for it and so forth and so forth. The point is, Ramosha also was very much against the bar mitzvah. As what it's become. He says, so the point is that you look at these innovations, necessarily good or not. But the point is that this whole innovation emerged from a world outside of Orthodoxy. And then you have to have analysis, is those motivations themselves good motivations? Are they not good motivations? In other words, the issue of do you want to have a bat mitzvah or not today it begins with the starting point where, well, why do you want to even think about bat mitzvah? Because of something that existed outside of Orthodoxy. Oh, so is what existed outside of Orthodoxy have value? Now,
that's what I was just going to say. So what does that mean? Anything that's outside of Orthodoxy?
So that's the point. You see, that's part of the issue. Okay, the fact of the matter is it may not.
No problem.
It may not. But so now you're getting into part of the issue. So it's an issue between conservative tradition or new development. Now this is actually a tension within Orthodoxy as well, because do you look forward or do you look backwards? The truth of the matter is that there's a book in Hebrew that I have. I forget. It was written by a professor at Bar Ilan University on the different visions of Sinai, a big Talmud Chacham as well, and so forth. And he pointed out that there's a romantic view of Sinai and there's a classical view of Sinai. And the way he points it out is, where's the ideal Torah? Is the ideal Torah at Sinai? So he says that's the classical model. Classical model, if you know from Greek thought, classical model says, here's the ideal, and all you're trying to do is protect it. You don't want it to become defiled or something like that. You're just trying to protect it. Okay. But if the ideal is into the future, and you're moving towards the ideal into the future, then what exists is you want to transform into that ideal. So it basically says that you want change, you want development. So he says there's an issue: is the ideal Torah the Torah at Sinai, or is the ideal Torah the Torah of the Mashiach? And that has an aspect is that is there movement within Torah over the ages? And or if there's movement, what is the purpose of movement? So you have this issue in terms of the rabbinic law. Is rabbinic law just trying to protect the ideal of Sinai? Or is rabbinic law basically saying we're trying to move the whole concept forward? So you have an issue, let's say, in terms of women in Judaism today. Okay? So is the new status of women a reflection of a movement in moral values? And therefore, if it is, and the fact that it can be integrated into Torah basically says, hey, you see, it is a movement forward, and the fact that it can be integrated into Torah says it's a movement forward to limits of the integration of Torah in that regard. That is one view. The other view is the ideal was at Har Sinai. And if women had a certain status at Har Sinai, that was the ideal. So therefore, any shift is not the ideal. Maybe you have to make shifts to protect things. Maybe you have to make shifts for certain community reasons and so forth. But this is part of the issue, and this exists in many aspects of Jewish thought. Do we move forward by certain mitzvah innovations, or are we away from the ideal because of those mitzvah innovations, or is it some mixture of of both? Okay.
I come back to what I said before. It could be a mixing of the two.
Right. The question
you're moving
is
forward, but you're basing your movement on not redefinition, but examination of.
But that's part of it. But there's a more fundamental issue involved here. You see, what you're stating is basically what I'm saying is the tension of Torah. To me, that's the tension of Torah, and that's where you have the issue of authority versus autonomy. There is that tension. There's a tension of knowledge versus a little bit more creativity or whatever. But the fact is that the movement, that to me, I take a position that we're supposed to move forward, but it is a very incremental movement forward, due to the necessity of developing the balance between authority and thought and ideas in terms of that movement. It's not easy, and in many ways you have to prove very clearly. But the difference is like this. You see, what we exist with it'd be one thing if we exist in a vacuum. So if we lived within our own world in our own vacuum, then we can sit there and say these movements are happening within our own dynamics, okay? And our dynamics are helping that movement within our own dynamics between this tension between is the ideal Torah at Sinai, the ideal Torah into the future, or is this or the dynamics of the movement of ideas. I mean, the truth when I talk about the ideal Torah in the future, I mean, Moshe Feinstein, who is not a liberal. I mean, the Moshe Feinstein basically said, when he came up with Chedushim, he said, what are you talking about? Chas v'shalom, that there's a kates to Torah. Chas v'shalom, that there's a limit to Torah. Lahagdil Torah la'adira. You're supposed to increase Torah, which endears it or beautifies it, glorifies it. In other words, it's a creative system as well, and so forth. So it's always expanding itself, but within certain parameters. The problem that exists in our world is we're not in a vacuum. And that's one of the real challenges nowadays, because outside of this vacuum, there are other ideas and other conclusions of those ideas, and those are influencing. Those have the potential to influence us by throwing us off what is the proper Torah perspective. Now, at the same point in time, my own perspective is the movements in the world are something that I believe is divinely intentional, to make us see new vistas in Torah, but with the lens of Torah and taking issues.
How do you link this back to defining Orthodoxy?
So the problem is what I've really done is show that in Orthodoxy there is a tremendous amount of tension in the philosophical basis of Orthodoxy. And that's inherent within Orthodoxy. It's not a monolithic system. It's a very, very broad system,
which is
and
good.
Which is not just good, but vital to its existence. And it's basically saying we want a lot of different ideas. So Orthodoxy is almost like, in many ways, it's wanting to see the spectrum of everything in existence.
But isn't there an inherent contradiction with that, within the, I'll use the word definition, of a halachic spectrum?
No, the halachic spectrum, it's not an inherent contradiction. No, the halachic spectrum, you see, let me try and put it like this. The way I see it is that there is a variety of moral values. It's just there's a variety of what I would call moral values or human values that we all exist with. There's a variety of moral values and human values that we all exist with. When you take black and white definitions of good and evil, let's say from the Christian perspective, this is good, this is bad. Lust, bad. Therefore, the saint can't have any lust. Okay. From a Jewish perspective, we don't say anything is really bad. Lust has its place. Okay? But it has its place within the total picture of life, right? Which means that it has its place. Anger has its place. Any emotion, anything has its place. What we're doing from a Jewish perspective, when we think in terms of good and evil from a Jewish perspective, it's making the correct decision between the various different emotions and values that we have to make a decision about. Because behavior is black and white. So you come down to it and say, like, well, like, let me give an example. When it talks about a wife going into Nida, right? So the Gemara almost says who has the chutzpah to tell a husband and wife that they can't sleep together? So almost it's like who has that chutzpah to tell these two people to sleep together, implying that the emotions, including the lust between a husband and wife, have a value. What's the chutzpah to tell this? Shoshana Shel Torah, the rose of Torah, which means, which says, and the reason rose is used because of the thorn bush. In other words, the Torah, which basically says, and that's why in Hilchos Nida there's such an idea that we don't want to keep a husband and wife separate from each other. It says, it says his hands were covered with blood, which basically in the pasuk in Tanakh refers to him being involved in war and so forth, and that's why he couldn't build the Beis Mikdash. But there's a midrashic analysis on his hands being covered with blood, that he was covered with blood, his hands were covered with blood, because we're covered with blood of Dam Nida, because he was always trying to find a heter to allow a wife to a husband. Okay? In other words, it's a value in that. So if someone comes up to you and says, like, you get a shiloh of husband and wife, I get people who ask shilohs husband and wife. So the simple answer is, hey, so don't sleep together. So you don't have sex. So what? The fact is in the halacha, there's a very strong idea you don't keep a husband and wife separate from each other. Okay? This is not to be understood as no parameters whatsoever. There's a concept of not always hanging around together, but there's certain aspects of moderation and so forth. But the fact is that this attraction between husband and wife have a value. The point is you have to find how you place that value amongst other values. and trying to find the balance. And that's usually the way we understand good and evil. Good and evil is not a good drive and a bad drive. It's that there are a variety of different drives we have to deal with, and we have to come to a conclusion of what is the good conclusion. And that's why in any act, when we talk about, like when the Maharal Prague says that there's nothing that's tummy that doesn't have a little bit of tahara, and there's nothing that's tahara that doesn't have a tuma, there's nothing that's also doesn't have a little bit of heter, there's nothing that's heter that doesn't have a little bit of this. Or the fact of the matter is, in any behavior that is done, find something good. Okay, it could be 99% bad. Well, it's good. Which means you have to make a decision not to do it. You can have another behavior. I'm not saying there's no such thing as 100%. Or you can have a situation where 99% is good and there's 1% bad. And you have to recognize that. That's an example when Yaakov sold the Bechor from Esav, right? When Esav cried out, Rashi says that cry, with that cry, Yaakov was punished that his generations would suffer at the hands of Bnei Esav. What did Yaakov do wrong? Yaakov had to do it. Wait a second. You have to do certain things that you have to do, but nothing is, or I shouldn't say, but it's not always 100% going to be good. There's always other sides to it. Esther saves the Jewish people. She did what she had to do. The result is that she lost her husband. Okay, there was a sad result to it. The point of the matter is, her kid was brought up as a non-Jew. Supposedly she had a child with Achashverosh, so the child with Achashverosh brought up as a non-Jew. There's consequences, but the fact is, in everything we do, it's not that there's a good drive and a bad drive. It's the fact that there are drives out in the world, and we have to figure out how to prioritize. And there's some drives we more often prioritize, and some drives we less often prioritize, and so forth. That's the drives that we more often prioritize are the good drives. The drives that we less often prioritize are what we call the bad drives, but they also have their place. What I'm trying to say is that's really what a lot of Judaism is about, is making that decision. The result of it, though...
But how is that different? That thought process different in Orthodox Judaism from conservative Judaism?
So that's what we're going to have to get into. That's exactly what we're going to have to get into. You're right.
That intellectual debate and translated into action should be no different across the board.
And the fact is that therefore it gets into what are the parameters used in making that decision. That's very much part of it, in terms of how you go about making that decision.
Is it not inherent in any thought process, or should it not be?
It's inherent in more modern thought processes of evaluating differences. I mean, the fact is that you see this idea in more modern thought processes, and then you all come to conclusions. Most people like black and white, right? Okay, that's what most people like. The fact is you do have this kind of weighing of values and so forth.
But isn't the stigma of Orthodoxy black and white?
So now you're getting to what I was trying to say.
And the reality is many move towards conservative or reform based on the ability to exercise that free will.
Because the fact is that within Orthodoxy there's a parameter, because God's voice has a little bit more say in it, and that's why you get certain Orthodox individuals saying, listen, if you'll have Orthodox individuals saying things like, and I've said this in certain situations. You have situations like, I'll say this in certain situations where I'll tell you that as a secular individual, I would side with A. Like, I understand totally this argument. I would side with A. As an Orthodox Jew, I can't side with A, because I believe in Torah and so forth. So that's a further. So the fact is one of the voices in the decision making of Orthodoxy is the voice of God, as understood through the halacha, the process. We'll have to get to that. But what I'm trying to say, though, is that this understanding the issue, and this leads to your other question of how people see Orthodoxy, is, I think, a response to Orthodoxy's challenge. You see, the development of autonomy, the value of autonomy, which seems to be part of this process, which says think, be creative, see new ideas, open up new vistas. when Reform Judaism took over that value and then started challenging the tradition and challenging the principles of the tradition, Torah Misinai and so forth, there was an entrenchment within Orthodoxy that basically led to that value being limited. Okay? And therefore, there's a difference I think would have happened, this is what I was saying before, if Orthodoxy would have existed in a vacuum. If Orthodoxy didn't have to think about conservative Judaism or Reform Judaism, maybe Orthodoxy, maybe not the same way Mordechai Kaplan is, maybe Orthodoxy would come up with its own idea of a bat mitzvah. Maybe Orthodox Judaism would have come up with other ideas. But because Orthodoxy lived beside this force which did not have Orthodox parameters and stressed this autonomy factor, Orthodoxy moved a little bit more to one side of lessening that. And that's become an issue nowadays because people are seeing in Orthodoxy, the more modern Orthodox world is advocating very much for the autonomy aspect, whatever. In the Haredi world, which is maintaining this question of authority, and the question is how you define the parameters. You see this a lot with women in Judaism today, in the sense that especially this is coming up in New York, where you have the ordination of women clergy called Maharat, and these people are stating that they are absolutely Orthodox. Now, the fact is that there is the question is, so how do you define Orthodoxy? There's people who say they're outside the pale. So the Yeshiva Chovevei Torah, which is this left, this very liberal Orthodox yeshiva, the Haredi world considers it to be a right-wing conservative place. They specifically say that they are true heirs of conservative Judaism. Okay, that's what they really believe. Okay, there's other views in Orthodoxy that says I disagree with their position, but I can't say it's outside the pale. Okay, and that's the tension: are they outside the pale, or are they not outside the pale? But I can tell you there is a problem, though. Okay, and the problem exists because many people who are involved with that yeshiva do have allegiances outside the pale. Okay, so I've had situations where, for example, where a person who is involved in this yeshiva, who's going out with a girl who goes to an egalitarian minyan at a conservative synagogue. Well, wait a second. Like I've mentioned to people many times, Rabbi Henkin, let's say Rabbi Henkin, the development in Nishmat, she got a tremendous, for her advanced women's study of Talmud, she had a backlash. But no one declared her outside the pale from the normative Jewish world. It's pretty well accepted as within the pale. And one of the reasons for that is because she took her issue, said the issue is Gemara. She basically argued for it she made it very much like this is going to be our issue within the vacuum of Orthodoxy. Okay? She made it clear that other innovations concerning women in Judaism outside of Orthodoxy were not going to interfere with what her focus was, and therefore it became a matter of innovation within a much more vacuum aspect of Orthodoxy. I felt that one of the mistakes that happened with this Maharat thing is that with the first ordination of a woman, what they call the Rabbi, someone mentioned that there was a whole meeting before of what they were going to name this new female or new woman ordained. And they said at this meeting that they had this whole discussion of women who were going to give their advice, there was a female Reform rabbi. And once I heard that, I said, okay, you just basically caused the problem. Because what does that feel? And this female Reform rabbi said, well, you know, it's like the Orthodox is sort of getting on board or whatever. But the fact of the matter is the minute you had a female Reform rabbi there, you were basically taking this out of being an Orthodox issue. You're bringing it up into being the issue of the world and now trying to influence Orthodoxy. And then Orthodoxy is going to respond by saying, wait a second, we don't want that influence. We don't want the influence from outside the pale to this extent. And that's part of the issue of defining the parameter nowadays. The fact is, define the parameter, but the fact is you have to understand that in defining the parameter, Orthodoxy does not exist in a vacuum. It's existing on a front where there's other systems which are clearly outside of Orthodoxy, who are dealing with similar issues, coming to certain conclusions, and those conclusions may not necessarily be what the Orthodox conclusions would be. And therefore there's a natural idea to say, let's stay away from it. Which means that any conclusion they're going to come to, we're going to be concerned about that conclusion. So if they come to conclusion A, the Orthodox are going to sit there and say, wait a second, we better really think before we say A. Even though it may have been that if it existed in a vacuum, Orthodoxy would have come to conclusion A on its own anyways. So that's part of the issues that exist in terms of defining the parameter. Okay, so we'll take it from here.